Happy Halloween, everybody. My name is Jason Grillo with AirMiners. It's great to see you all here today. What we're doing today is talking about biochar, substance we all have come to know and love. Many of us have come to know and love, I should say, as a carbon removal method, but also find out how to unlock its potential in purposes beyond what we typically know it as a soil amendment. So how can we use it as a building material, or as in say roadways, or in producing energy? What are some of those ways that biochar can be unlocked as a method of doing things that are, certainly valuable as a soil amendment, but other ways that we can make this the substance itself a way of integrating into our daily lives. So with that, we've got our typical cycle of our 40 minutes or so of discussion, followed by Q&A for 15 or 20 minutes at the tail end, and then we'll have networking for a half an hour afterwards. Feel free to ask questions in the chat as we go, and as we do so, at the Q&A, I'll come on and ask who would like to speak, and unmute yourselves and talk about what is of interest to you among the panel. We've got, like I said, tremendous panel in mind on hand today, as well as Kathleen Draper, chairperson of the board of the International Biochar Initiative, as our moderator. So thank you, Kathleen, for making yourself available today. Really appreciate it. Before we go any further, I would also be remiss to not mention, and this might be a time for Wendy or Kathleen to type it in the chat, that on November 7th through 9th is the International Biochar Initiative's annual symposium. So link will be dropped shortly, where all sorts of new and interesting innovations and initiatives in biochar are going to be discussed. So there's that. Like I said, this event is being recorded, and also our event today is being recorded. We'll be put on our YouTube channel today. If you have to duck out a little early, totally get it. But without further ado, I just want to say once again, thank you for coming. And Kathleen, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Jason, and thanks for the plug about our symposium next week. It's coming out fast, so I hope you can join us. And thank you for the invitation to come and talk about two of my favorite topics, one being the use of biochar in the built environment. I don't know if you can see behind me, but this is my biochar plaster wall in my office, which I did about 2.5 years ago now. It doesn't really show up well on Zoom webinars, I found out. So, but joining me to talk about that subject, the use of biochar in concrete and plaster and other building materials, we have Dr. Mario Schmitt, the CEO of a German company called Ecolocked, as well as Eric Bava, the COO of a US company called Verde Resources. And then after we chat about that for a little bit, we'll speak with Lauren Breynaert from another US company called Myno that is focusing on energy use in a biochar production scenario. So with that, Mario, maybe if you want to kick off and talk a little bit about what Ecolocked is doing in the concrete space, some of the opportunities you see, challenges, that type of thing. That'd be great.
Yeah, very happy to. Thanks, Kathleen. So yeah, I'm Mario. As Kathleen said, CEO of Ecolocked, which is a German climate tech startup. We're on a mission to really bring biochar carbon removal to a gigaton scale by developing value-adding applications, I would say, in building materials. And these applications then, of course, also serve as carbon sinks. And the first one we're going to is concrete, because in concrete we can achieve most impact. So the motivation behind that is that already today we could store 4 gigatons of CO2 in the built environment with what we're building new every year, and we can unlock that by turning biochar into a construction product. Precisely what we offer, we call that a turnkey solution to build with concrete that is on the one hand 100% carbon neutral and has performance benefits. And these performance benefits that we can achieve there include like less need for cement and sand, but also better insulation against noise and heat, lower weight, of course, higher resilience against weather, freeze and thaw, water storage capacity, and many, many more. And I guess how we achieve those functionalities very consistently is by making use of what many consider a challenge, which is the chemical variety in different biomass-derived biocarbons, because we've tested by now like close to 50 different biochars in more than 400 concrete mixes and really build up a performance database. And so that actually brings us to one of the challenges, which is of course the variability in different feedstocks, which many consider a limitation to rolling out biochar on a global scale. And I think that's on the one hand true, but also it bears a lot of potential because different chemical qualities that you find in different biochars, whether that's silica content or of course nitrogen content or internal surface area, play a role for different end applications, and they can be made use of. So for us, the first products that we brought to market this year is for precast concrete, and we just started selling there. And yeah, just quickly about us, we're a team of 18 people, 3 founders, combining tech and business side. My own background is in finance and sustainability. And yeah, really for me, why I became an entrepreneur in the biochar space is because I was so intrigued by the technology and really thought like that's how we can create climate impact really fast. I think 2 other topics that would be interesting to explore today. One is, of course, certification. So how do we get new applications? How do we make sure we not only meet the norm, but also that this is officially certified? And that's a question of market. I know we have a different regime in Europe than in the US, for example. And that, of course, also very much relates to how biochar carbon removal is perceived by the public, by the administration. Yeah, so in Europe, there's a new carbon removal framework being developed, and the EBI is fighting a lot for biochar to play a stronger role there because the framework is focused a lot on mineralization and geological storage. Yeah, and I think maybe I pause there, and I'm looking forward to discussing those further.
Yeah, you dove right into some of the areas I was going to have you talk a little bit more about. But before we do that, specifically what properties are relevant, I think maybe Eric, if you want to dive in here for a little bit and talk about the use of biochar in asphalt and where that's, I mean, that's just come on so quickly. It's really exciting to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Kathleen, and thank you, Jason and AirMiners, for having me. Very excited to be here. So I'm Eric Bava, COO of Verde Resources, oversee operations, production, and facility expansion here in the United States for our biochar asphalt, as well as strategic partnerships to push innovation and sustainability, specifically in the construction industry. As Kathleen mentioned, this is a growing subject, and it's definitely picking up steam. We have had the opportunity to deploy this product, all over the world. But what we're doing today here is expanding that opportunity here in the United States. Over the past 60 days, we have successfully completed and installed about 6 mini showcases, all the way from Chicago down to Louisiana. And the feedback has been amazing. So we are excited to expand on that, expand operations in our hub in LaBelle, Missouri, as well as down in Louisiana, because it's all about the feedstock. It's all about the feedstock that we can get our hands on, to produce more biochar then to include into our final product, the bio asphalt. So there's many benefits, as we all know, on the environmental side of biochar, but I'm sure we'll talk further on the day-to-day benefits of biochar and asphalt, touching on, the durability, the performance, the cost savings, and there's so many other benefits that come to it. So look forward to discussing further on that. And thanks again for having me.
Thanks, Derek. And I'm trying to use my recently acquired spell casting skills to get them to come up and do a little demo in my part of the world in upstate New York. But we'll see where that goes.
We'll get
Maybe
there, I
both
promise.
of you could, maybe both of you could talk a little bit about price sensitivity. One thing I realized in the US versus Europe, I was just at a company that was making biochar concrete in Switzerland, and the tolerance for increasing the price in that was a lot higher than what I'd experienced here in the US. So Mario, do you want to talk about that first, and then we'll hear from Brad on that too? Sorry, not Brad.
Yeah. So, I mean, we haven't tried selling to the US yet, but we've also heard the same thing. What I can say is that it differs also between different construction value chain parties, right? So right now, we work a lot directly with concrete manufacturers and especially precast manufacturers. And I think there's a certain willingness to pay because what you get is a very tangible product that you even put on your website, and you can give it nice sort of marketing benefits in terms of sustainability, which is of course not necessarily what we want to, I guess, incentivize in the long term, but it's a motivation that sort of makes people act that way, as we all know. Another one is, I guess, and that's probably a driver for why things are a little different in Europe than in the US. In Europe, there's already markets where you have maximum thresholds for embodied CO2 in concrete, including Denmark, the Netherlands, and France. And although the reductions are not super high yet that are demanded there, this is, of course, something that people are aware of. They are afraid of this happening in Germany as well. It will at some point. And in further countries, it will get more strict. So these are motivations that we can see. And so I think there is a certain willingness to pay a premium for that with the concrete manufacturers, and then also with the real estate developers, because ultimately you can market your building as more sustainable, the whole project, which also increases the value, especially if you can get green building certifications for that. Now, when we think of larger market players like cement manufacturers, who we also talk to and have some LOIs with, there the thinking is much more about long-term price parity, right? Because there we're talking about really, really high volumes, and we're talking about a market which almost has it has very, very slim margins, right? So this is definitely top of their mind. And one way we try to get by the fact that biochar is currently still more expensive than where it will be in the future is through these functional benefits that I was mentioning, that we can valorize, target certain concrete customers who care about them, and thereby increase the willingness to pay.
Yeah, that's a good point. Eric, sorry, when your face disappeared, the name Brad came up, so that's why I called you that. Apologies. But
I'll go by both. No worries. Call me Brad for Halloween. But yeah, no, a great insight, Mario. I think what the great thing about let's call it construction char, so biochar that's going to be used in the construction industry, is that we can utilize low grade and not so clean feedstock. And that's huge. So it doesn't have to, it's a lot cheaper, than the high grade agrochar, that is out there, because we are going to be, deploying this into, a bioasphalt. So I think that's a huge benefit when we go out and talk with, biochar manufacturers at the moment, because we can kind of mix and match different feedstocks, different chars in our bioasphalt. So I think, that's a huge selling point when we speak with these manufacturers on a strategic level. One other thing as well, too, is that, the asphalt industry is massive here in the United States. I would say 500 million tons of asphalt is laid a year. So to go in with with strength behind those numbers, when we talk to these biochar manufacturers, we could really sign offtake agreements saying, you know what, we're ready to talk, big numbers and do some business. But then also, as we all know, once the biochar asphalt is installed, the carbon credits are generated. So there's obviously that talk about splitting, a revenue or doing some sort of profit split, with that biochar, manufacturer. So I think the low grade aspect, the ability to be able to use many different feedstocks, major volume, when it comes to putting this in as a byproduct of the biochar asphalt, is big when we're speaking with manufacturers on a strategic level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would fully agree there with Eric that the ability to work with a variety of feedstocks is what I think is really crucial to scaling up biochar carbon removal. Like if we really want to bring it to gigaton scale in terms of the impact achieved, then it needs to be that way that Eric just described. And that's possible in concrete and it's possible in asphalt. And that's, I guess, one of the great things about the material applications.
Do either of you see any regulatory pushback on what types of biochar could be used from a toxin perspective? And I'm asking that because a year or two ago, I was on a call with some Department of Transportation folks, and they were, very worried about this, what they called lateral landfills. And they didn't want, heavy metal content or things like that involved. Have you, either of you, heard any pushback like that?
So what I'm seeing is that is state by state basis, just preliminary discussions. I know there are there is a ton of waste out there that's called like radioactive, for example, and it really is up to the state. Obviously, there is going to have to be some major testing to be done on the front end, prior to that getting approved. We have worked with that. We have done a little R&D already behind the scenes, to push that along a little bit further. But what we're seeing is a lot of these representatives, local governments, municipalities, state governments, are really coming to us and say, what can you do with this? There's mounds of some of this waste piled up everywhere. And if we could utilize it and then we could, store it into the ground through the biochar asphalt application, they're happy. The greatest thing about that too is that some of these states and municipalities and companies will pay us to remove the waste, so then we can process that into the finished product. So I would say it depends on the state, and some are definitely going to be a little bit more lenient than others.
Yeah, I agree. So I think what we see in Europe is that there's definitely some basic requirements when it comes to heavy metals, for example, in there, or persistent organic pollutants. And that would be criteria that we also put on our suppliers to ensure that they have processes in place that either remove or ensure that those are removed, or we take care of that ourselves through our mix designs, of course. One interesting anecdote here is maybe classic example of European bureaucracy is that certain materials are, when they are classified as waste in Europe, you are not necessarily allowed to use them in certain kinds of products again, which then is a matter of national legislation. But this is now actually changing, but it includes things such as manure and not manure, I don't think so, but sewage sludge and demolition wood, for example, and then they would need to go through an official end of waste process to kind of lose that tag before you can use them again in new build. But this is being overhauled right now, and obviously it needs to, right? Because not only in biochar, but in many different applications, being able to make use of those cheap waste materials is going to be crucial for a low carbon economy.
Yep, I would agree. I would also say that IBI is in the process of coming out with standards specific to biochar use in concrete and in asphalt, and they will comply with national regulations in terms of levels of toxicity. So that is being handled by one of the IBI board members, Karen Waikua. I think he'd already had some preliminary standards announced a couple of months ago, but that's still a work in progress. You mentioned briefly the properties of relevance, and I know everybody wants to know how much you're paying for your biochar, but I think before we get on that, if you could each talk about how broad a range of biochars you could specify. I know, Mario, you said you've already tested them, so presumably you've eliminated some or identified certain either physical or chemical properties of relevance for this particular end use.
Yeah, so that of course goes a little bit into our IP, so I got to be careful here in terms of how deep I go, but just to give some references here. So out of those close to 50 biochars that we've tested, a big part works in concrete if you know how to tweak the recipes to make it work, right? Because we know that some challenges that can occur when you put biochar into concrete, unprocessed, not refining the mix design is, of course, loss of workability, loss of strength, maybe not early strength, but later after the curing, and durability as well. What we've seen is that there is a certain share of biochars that work well in almost all recipes, unless you put really a lot of them in. Nevertheless, particle size is totally crucial even with those, right? So particle size is really a key factor. And then there's a big part that you can get to work in many different concrete mixes, and you can even use them to reach certain functionalities that you want to achieve if you tweak the recipes in that way. And then I guess there's a certain share, which I would put at probably 10% of what we've tested, that seem to not fit, or we would have to take measures that are too extensive and not economical to make them work in concrete. But I think what that shows is that really, just like, I guess, in asphalt, as Eric was saying, a broad variety of waste-derived biochars can be utilized.
And what price point are you looking for, more or less, these days?
We see all sorts of different prices. We actually got quoted by suppliers for 2026. We got quoted prices per ton of around 200 euros even, which is very, very good. And there, I think what this shows is the effect of being able to promise larger volumes, right? Because I think it's just economies of scale, and when they can plan with larger volumes, that of course makes producers reconsider also their economics. But last year we still also paid prices when we were testing different biochars of like 1,500 a ton, right? Right now we are in the range of somewhere around 400. So also illustrates where the market is going. I think how these lower cost feedstocks are influencing production cost, how the progress in production technology is reducing production costs, and then also the ability that more and more have to cross-subsidize through revenues from green energy production, of course.
Mm-hmm. And that price, is that including the carbon credit, or do you sell that separately?
So we would normally procure the biochar including the carbon credits. Yeah, the 400. Let's say if we put it including carbon credits, it's more 400 to 600 right now.
Yeah.
But then going down to 200 to 300 is what we're seeing.
Interesting. Eric, what about on the asphalt side?
Yeah, to get into the it's called the recipe. We have a unique emulsion that allows us to use many different types of carbon content material, which is great, which is a huge bonus. Obviously, we do have some specific requirements in terms of the percentage of carbon content, as well as, the moisture content, of that, of the finished biochar. So, in terms of on the, the biomass side, there's so many different types of biomass that we could use here, in the States. For one example, wood, used pallets, from various ports, is big. We could use, cow manure, as well. I can go down on the list, bagasse, which is sugarcane waste. So again, it just really all depends on the, the finished carbon content, the moisture content. But getting into our recipe, we do have a unique emulsion that is very flexible to allow us to use various types of carbon content.
Yeah, that's really a nice thing that you don't have to be so specific.
We can thank our CTO Andre. So he's
yeah, I remember talking to him a couple of years ago about that, and
Yes.
he was very adventurous in terms of testing all sorts of different types of biochar.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm gonna switch over to the other topic we were gonna cover today with Lauren, which is talking about optimizing all co-products of biochar production. Something I don't see enough in the US, but I see a lot more in Europe, and that is likely because of the cost of energy and things like that. But Lauren, are you not seeing
Yep,
you
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Why don't you tell us a little bit about what Myno's up to, and maybe what you see the uses for the electricity or heat are in this context?
Totally. Good to see some new faces, some familiar faces here. I'm Lauren Breynaert, Public Affairs Director with Myno Carbon, and just a quick overview of what Myno is up to. And we're a startup company based out on Bainbridge Island in Washington State, and we are building large-scale, what we call biochar carbon removal facilities. And our first facility, as an example, will intake 183,000 bone-dry tons of timber feedstock, sustainably sourced waste biomass, both coming from slash piles, in-wood slash piles that we grind, forest thinnings, as well as mill residuals. And we bring that to our facility to generate, through a gasification process, about 40,000 tons of biochar. And during that process, we generate significant syngas waste heat that we could just send up the stack. But instead, we are converting that heat into renewable electricity, into 20 megawatts of baseload renewable electricity. I will mention, though, that, we provide, or we have that waste heat we are using for our first facility to generate renewable electricity. But for other facilities, we could connect directly with a facility that needs that waste heat. As an example, cement manufacturers that need to decarbonize. And one of the ways they can do that is by getting more renewable waste heat. So just want to mention that. So that's a general overview.
Have you considered co-locating with direct air capture folks, because they obviously need a lot of electricity as well?
Yeah, we're definitely under consideration of a couple facilities. We, our sort of criteria are, does it have around 200,000+ tons of feedstock, both ag as well as timber residuals. I will mention too, right? We are exploring the cement and asphalt industries as a way to sell our biochar. So also looking at, dirtier feedstocks that, if we were to co-locate next to a cement facility, as an example, there could be, more dirty biomass in the area and timber residuals. And so diverting those feedstock streams to different end biochar markets is something we're exploring as well.
Yeah. I forgot to ask Mario and Eric, are you guys actually producing your own biochar, or are you buying it? And if you are producing it, using heat or creating electricity?
So we are currently not producing our own biochar because we really saw it as the key challenge to develop those material applications. And it's a benefit for us to work with as many materials as possible. And that's why we work with so many different suppliers. But yeah, a big part of those is reusing the waste heat. So for example, in Europe, right, one big player would be Novo Carbo, who also sells heat to nearby industries.
That's right. Yeah, it is more common. I was just in Switzerland for the IBI study tour, and we visited a very large plant that is going to, the heat's going into a district heating system. We don't have that as frequently here, right, Lauren? So I think it's been a little bit of a challenge, except where they're retrofitting some of these bioenergy plants to produce more biochar. But I have struggled to see, you know, where those big energy users are, where there's a lot of biomass, and the biochar could possibly be used in some sort of circular way. Would you agree? I mean, it's
Oh, totally. I mean, you know, our COO, Mike, you know, has challenged everyone to find, you know, locations and sites that we could co-locate with, and district heating is one of them. But there are not a lot of examples of district heating in areas that have that feedstock. You know, I'll also mention too, you know, beyond electricity generation, we are exploring the possibility for our first facility of, you know, sending that the electricity that we generate to charge heavy duty trucks that transport our feedstock, which further reduces the CI score of our facility, of the biochar, and, you know, is a better climate story as well. Also, Washington State just won the Pacific Northwest, as a part of the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Hub application. So there's expected to be billions of dollars coming into the Pacific Northwest to grow green hydrogen markets. Also exploring, you know, adding on, you know, green hydrogen production in our facility. I think for us, you know, our gasification technology, you know, is tuned, unlike biomass energy, to produce, you know, to convert over 35% of that original biomass into sequestered carbon in the form of biochar. But then we have this waste heat that we can really utilize to further decarbonize, whether it's meeting clean fuel standards or renewable electricity standards or green hydrogen production. So, you know, I think for our first facility, we'll be focused on renewable energy, but you know, we want to be flexible because the markets are changing. And so we're keeping our eyes open on what's next.
Yeah. And I will say 40,000 tons of biochar is a big slice of what is currently being produced in the US. So that's, you know, a challenge right there to find buyers at the right price. Do you have the flexibility? Some of the gasification plants in Europe can vary the yield based on different needs for heat versus markets for biochar?
Yes, we do have that flexibility. I don't know to what degree. I'm sure other folks on our team do, but yeah, we could tune it to produce 40,000 tons or less, more energy production. But you know, as you said, we are actively developing out those downstream markets, hopefully working with Eric and Mario on concrete and asphalt as well. But you know, that I would say that's the biggest hurdle, right? Within our economic model, you know, the steam can generate electricity. That is an agreement we put in place. That's a price. You know, voluntary carbon removal credits. There's a market for that. It's pretty established. We're working with an entity there. You know, I would say the largest hurdle is the biochar markets that, you know, I know many of us on this call are actively working to develop. And, you know, our bet and our CEO's bet is, you know, when you produce significant supply, consistent, affordable supply, that will help evolve the market. And so that is one of our, you know, thesis of our first facility.
Yeah, I just want to kind of jump in here. I agree. I mean, the biochar industry is growing. You know, I think not only just doing strategic partnerships in the construction industry, but doing strategic partnerships in the biochar industry and partnering with the right, companies to allow us to deploy and install more asphalt, was huge. I just kind of want to put it in perspective. For every 1 mile of road, we need 300 tons of biochar. So, that's just a huge amount of biochar, obviously compared to the ag side. That's why we, are going this direction, with Verde. But, we plan on doing our own manufacturing of biochar, I would say by late 2024, to kind of get our paralysis systems in place, and things like that. But to, I guess, quickly expedite installations and to deploy our biochar asphalt, in many states currently, we will be sourcing. And we definitely want to work with the right partners, so everybody benefits. It's all about everybody benefiting, everybody working together, and everybody, making, money at the same time.
That will be music to a lot of people's ears. I think I get calls at least once a week saying, I can make this much biochar, but I need an offtake agreement. And I've been hearing that for at least the last 2 years, obviously pushed by the carbon markets and everybody wanting to, cash in on that revenue, but without a long-term sequestration use for the biochar, a lot of people have struggled to scale. So that's exciting to hear. And it's not just concrete and asphalt, though I think those are enormous. I had worked on a project putting it in drywall. I have used it in my septic system. There's all sorts of uses that if we can get the cost right, I think we can decarbonize the built environment enormously. And I and others are going to be talking a little bit more about that next week during the symposium. So, yeah. And I don't know if any of you have samples. Is that road behind you built with biochar, Eric?
It sure is. We do. I don't have samples under my desk at the moment, but like I mentioned, we have done some successful installs here in the States, and we're going to continue to do more, bigger and greater. We do have videos out there, so we're going to continue to keep doing these installations and prove it out. One thing I just kind of want to add, before we kind of move on, is that the carbon credit generating revenue is great. What's unique about our situation is that we're just looking at that as like a cherry on top. The day-to-day selling and installation of our bio asphalt is what is going to move our needle. And because there's the industry is so big, the infrastructure unfortunately in this country and in these specific states and cities is crumbling. And hopefully we could fix that. So we are able to purchase this biochar to deploy on a day-to-day while we can generate those carbon removal credits as extra cherry on top revenue.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you said it was 300 tons per mile of road. Is that just in the asphalt? Because when I first talked to Andre, he was saying it could also be included in the substrate, I think it's called, underneath the asphalt. Yeah, so that's just the wearing course. So the top level, the top layer, that's just the wearing course. So yeah, if we include it in the base course, which could go 6 inches deep, we could do emulsion plus biochar in the base course as well. But for now, where the industry is, we're just really focused on more of road maintenance and overlays. So if we did an overlay, it would be 300 tons per mile for the wearing course, so the overlay course.
And Eric, I actually have a question about the carbon credits as well.
Sure.
You seeing that the customers you work with, so the municipalities and the developers, are they not interested in the carbon credits? Because what we see with concrete is that the end customers would actually be interested in being able to claim that the concrete is truly carbon neutral, which they can only do, of course, if that carbon removal effect is not sold off to other corporates who do offsetting with it. So is that similar in asphalt? Because you were saying that you could also sell the certificate separately, which we could, of course, as well, but then we would go down with the carbon impact.
To be honest with you, the hot mix asphalt industry has been in their ways for so many years that we have to come in and educate them. There are many sustainability goals that they need to start meeting. The construction industry, as we know, is going this route: eco-friendly, environmental friendly, sustainable products. So it's an ongoing discussion as we could educate them on not only the benefits of the day-to-day product, with the performance and durability, but really just educate them on the carbon credit revenue. It's been a lot of, it's been music to a lot of people's ears, because again, they're making money on the front end with saving money on the installation. And then we hit them with, a revenue share of the carbon credit revenue, on top of that. So we've had a lot of successful conversations, but it's definitely a lot of education still with various companies and municipalities and government officials.
Great.
It always is with biochar, lots of education.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Yep.
Cool. Sorry to break in here, but it's just about time for audience Q&A. And I just want to ask Dougal Heap to unmute because he's got a question that I think that kind of flows from what Mari and Eric, you were just talking about. Lauren, love to hear your question, your answer to that too. Dougal, do you want to unmute? Because kind of leads into what I was considering about a question I had in the back of my mind as well. So Dougal, feel free.
Yeah, thank you very much. So the first question is, what is the biochar actually replacing in the concrete? Is it replacing the sand or the gravel or the cement itself? And then leading on from that, I think you just answered this, but I used to work for companies that were mineralizing hazardous waste and industrial waste to make aggregate to go into concrete. And the big problem was you couldn't sell the carbon removal credit separately from the product. And if you did, then the product was no different from regular sand or gravel. So are you saying that the buyer, in order to say that the embodied carbon of the concrete is lower, the buyer of the biochar also has to pay whatever it is, $200 a ton for the credit to go with it, in order to reduce the embodied carbon?
Yeah, I mean, it's after all an accounting question. Let me just briefly expand on the first one. So the short answer is all of it. So depending on the mix design and the desired functionalities, we can replace cement, we can replace sand, or also lightweight aggregates, depending really on, depending on the functionalities you want to achieve, right? And in different proportions. And of course, chemically, they work in different ways. I mean, biochar is not a binder. It can work as a binder enhancer because it delays the hydration reaction and leads to more cement actually getting activated. But ultimately, and this is also a question when it comes to certification, right? In what category do you put it? Certification of the materials would be much easier if you could clearly put it into a cement or an SCM, right? And secondary cementitious materials category, or in an aggregates category. But that's still something that we are discussing with the legislator. What's the best fit there? In terms of the carbon credits, I mean, for us as a company, it's really, really important that we create a net positive impact when it comes to climate. And that means that we need to avoid double counting, because if we have a construction company claiming that they are offsetting the emissions that have been, or like a real estate developer, wouldn't be the construction company, but they have offset the emissions created during cement production with this biochar. And then there's also, let's say, Microsoft or Amazon or Stripe offsetting emissions on the other end of the world. With that's not net positive, right? And so the answer is yes, the one who wants to claim in their books that this concrete is carbon neutral should also buy the credits. And this is like Eric said, right? It's part of our education mission to get customers to understand that. But so far, the echo has been very, very positive from our customers. And well, of course, there's a scenario in which you could say this concrete has been produced with carbon negative, or this concrete is storing 250 kilograms of captured CO2, right? Let's say powered by Microsoft or something like that. I mean, that's possible, but I think we just got to be really, really careful here to not make it greenwashing. And actually in the EU, they are discussing a new framework to avoid greenwashing, whereby saying that something is carbon neutral or climate friendly, if it isn't, like if you can't really prove that it is, will be penalized.
Yeah. I wish I was someone from Carbon Kit here.
Yeah. Yeah. Got it. Got it.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to make sure we're getting to. Kate Murphy had a question as well on regulatory and commercial hurdles.
Yeah, I think you guys might have answered at least part of this, but yeah, I was wondering about commercial hurdles. I know that occasionally some of the companies that have been working on synthetic aggregates via carbon mineralization have run into some roadblocks, no pun intended, to customer acceptance, as well as regulatory acceptance, despite having very good properties. So wondering how you guys are approaching that.
Mara, you want to take that?
If not, I'm happy to start. I mean, yeah, as you said, right, I think a lot of it has to do with the regulatory hurdles. Luckily, there's markets as part of the overall concrete market. There are certain segments that do not require certification of the material, which again is different depending on what geography we're talking about, right? But non-structural applications typically would not require having the input material certified, but rather you just need to prove that the product you create, which is the concrete block, actually meets all the standards, which is much easier to do, and you do that together with the customer. Besides that, I mean, price is definitely a topic. We also touched upon that, and I think it will be crucial to use all of those levers that we have, including declining production costs, scale, feedstock, etc., and functional benefits that have a value for the end user. Use all of that to make it price competitive, and then I think and besides that, lots of education, just really positive lobbying for biochar, for lack of a better word. I know the connotation with lobbying is not always positive, but I think biochar carbon removal can have such a positive impact on the world that it's really a good thing what IBI and EBI and all of those associations are doing to promote it, and thereby reduce the risk that customers may see.
Yeah,
I just want to add one thing.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry,
Go ahead, Kathleen.
I think it sort of behooves us in the industry, when we're talking to buyers of biochar related carbon credits, to also suggest that they not just buy the credit, but they buy the biochar and have it incorporated in some way into their built environment. So a classic example to me could be that Microsoft, when they're building these data centers, could use an awful lot of biochar in their data centers, which, you know, provides more than just biochar sequestration. It's going to help with additional insulation and things like that. So I would really like to see more conversations happening about coupling both the biochar and the carbon credits.
Cool.
Yeah, and then just one thing to add to that, in terms of, you know, the certification process, you know, there is going to be, you know, local municipalities, states, and federal, you know, certification processes that will need to take place, you know, for us to be able to install, this product on a state, and national level. Obviously, this is very new to the construction industry, the use of biochar as a byproduct, in the final product. So, we do have a plan to do all the certifications, do everything by the book, when it comes to the state and federal level, so we can, deploy this, on new roads, bridges, and airport runways, across the country. So, there again, it's a lot of education because of the use of biochar, but we feel that we have a great head start, and we'll continue to get certification, by these state and local municipalities.
One thing I just want to add is I think with a lot of biochar markets and commercialization pathways, there tends to be a bit of a roadblock or maybe lack of opportunity at the federal level for incentivizing biochar, whether it's used as a, enhanced fertilizer or a concrete additive. And that was, as we were diving into markets on behalf of Myno, started thinking about we need a stronger voice at the federal level. So just one plug is US Biochar Coalition was created to support a unifying lobbying voice around biochar. And I'm going to bring, as a co-founder, I'm going to bring one of these issues to the table. And I think an incentive around DOE, adding buy clean, buy fair, and making sure biochar is within that recommended use for future federal roadways and airports is a really big opportunity. So just noting that, and something that, we need to keep track of is which policies do we need in order to get these commercial pathways off the ground.
Got it. Cool. Oh, bless you. Craig, last question, and then we'll conclude. So go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Jason. And firstly, thanks to the panelists. Look, that's just a really great discussion. As you're thinking about the carbon credit side of the biochar, how do you see MRV? Eric, you'd mentioned sort of the different carbon levels depending on the feedstock. And I wonder how the panelists think about MRV coming into it, how that affects, how it factors into the sequestered carbon as an output when you've got different carbon levels coming in as in different varying feedstocks.
Yeah,
go ahead, Mario.
Okay. And I just turned off my video because I have a battery issue here. But so for us, we're actually working on a solid process for end-to-end MRV right now with Carbon Future, because biochar and concrete is such a new application. And I think how it differs also from other, let's say, carbon credit transactions that we've seen in the past is that there are steps happening after the initial production, such as processing the biochar, which of course need to be accounted for in the MRV, right? And that's why we are working on this transparent end-to-end process. Carbon Future is also looking, I think someone was asking about blockchain, looking into that. And when it comes to the variety of feedstocks and different carbon content that would result from it, this would already be part of the supplier LCA that we start with, right? So essentially, there's an X Works LCA that the MRV provider would get, and then that's what we base the C-Sync potential on that we purchase, and then our own LCA for the processing and everything comes on top, and then you got the net carbon removed. And then maybe just one more note, because I saw someone in the chat was saying that many internal reduction methods might already be cheaper than buying biochar carbon removal credits. That's true, although to some extent, right? I think in concrete, you can reduce emissions to like 40–50% with cheap available methods. Everything else is still a bit far from maturity. But even when that happens, that's a good thing, because then less of the credits are needed to get to carbon neutral concrete. And then we can totally sell off the rest of the credits to any buyer who has a tougher time reducing their hard to abate emissions, which in the building industry might still be actually that same project because you have steel there and you have aluminum, right? So the more we are able to abate emissions in cement, the better still.
Okay. Got it. Got it. Cool. Cool.
Jason,
Other,
can I just give
yes,
one last plug?
please, please,
Or
please,
my
please.
friend John will not be happy with me. I will be talking about this subject not only next week at the IBI virtual symposium, but at the USBI in-person conference in February. So I hope you can all join us at that event.
Indeed. Indeed. Good, good, good. So Eric shared his info at Verde Resources. I also shared some of the other panelists and speaker emails in the chat. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been fantastic. We're going to cut now to our networking portion of the program. So I just want to say thank you so much to the panelists. Thank you so much to Kathleen for moderating. Hope to see you at, if not the IBI symposium, then at the USBI meeting in Sacramento in February, or both. This event has been recorded, and we're going to put it up on our YouTube channel in a couple of days. And hopefully you can take a look at it then. Also, one final thing. We can't make our events any better unless we hear feedback from you about what we're doing well, what we're not doing so well, and how we can improve. Our events are here to serve you as an audience, and we want to make sure that we are achieving that in AirMiners. So any questions or comments or concerns, feel free to share them in the post-event survey, and I'll share that one last time in the chat. You'll also get an email afterwards. Please do let us know, and we'll take it from there. Otherwise, I just want to say thank you so much for coming. Thank you again to speakers, to our speakers today, and look forward to seeing you at our next event, which is going to be in a few weeks, about direct air capture and storage. So see you then. It'll be at the end of November. Otherwise, I spoke falsely. That's at the end of November. Our next event in next week's time is going to be on state and local policy initiatives for carbon removal. So I spoke a little bit too soon, but yeah, and I'll share the link to that here now, so you can sign up for that as well. November 8th is the date of the state and local policy event.
And isn't your boot camp starting next week?
It's starting on November 13th. Fair enough. All right, folks. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.